For the first time in decades, Washington is facing a challenge it never expected. A young leader, just 36 years old, has emerged in Burkina Faso and is shaking the foundations of American foreign policy. His name is Ibrahim Traoré, and the world is starting to take notice, not just because of his youth or even his position, but because he has dared to confront power in ways that echo the boldest moments of history. To understand why Washington is terrified of him, we need to look beyond headlines and soundbites into the hidden networks, the secret deals, and the invisible forces that have governed Africa for generations. This is the story of a battle America cannot win, and the man who is rewriting the rules. For decades, Africa has been a chessboard for global powers. Unlike other regions, the continent was never just about land or resources. It was about influence, about shaping the future of trade, politics, and even culture. The United States, along with its Western allies, perfected a subtle form of control. It was a system built not on overt conquest, but on manipulation, loans, military aid, and covert operations. Governments that complied were rewarded. Those that resisted were quietly removed. Patrice Lumumba, the first democratically elected leader of Congo, was assassinated with the direct involvement of the CIA. Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary president in the 1980s, was eliminated after trying to resist foreign domination. These were not isolated tragedies. They were part of a pattern, a blueprint designed to keep Africa weak, divided, and dependent on Western powers. Washington's strategy relied on multiple levers of control. Financial institutions like the IMF and World Bank offered loans that seemed generous on the surface, but came with hidden strings. African nations were encouraged, or pressured, to privatize industries, open their markets to foreign companies, and maintain policies favorable to Western interests. Militarily, the United States expanded its presence across the continent through AFRICOM, quietly establishing bases and training programs that gave it strategic reach. Intelligence operations ensured that any leader who threatened this system could be neutralized before their influence spread too far. For decades, this system worked perfectly. Leaders complied, resources flowed, and Washington remained in the shadows, pulling strings without needing to invade or occupy. Africa became a region of immense resources, yet so dependent that its potential remained largely untapped by its own people. But systems built on fear and control are fragile, and when a man like Ibrahim Traoré rises, the old rules no longer apply. Traoré's path to power was dramatic. Born into modest circumstances, he rose through the military ranks, inspired by the ideals of Thomas Sankara and the dream of a truly independent Africa. Unlike other leaders who might have sought personal enrichment, Traoré focused on restoring dignity to his nation. His leadership was sudden, his rise unexpected, and his vision clear. The first major shock came when he demanded the departure of French troops from Burkina Faso. For decades, France had maintained military influence across the region, effectively acting as a gatekeeper for Western interests. By expelling them, Traoré was sending a clear message. Foreign domination will no longer dictate our future. Traoré's speeches quickly became global news. He accused the West of hypocrisy, pointing out how foreign nations claimed to fight terrorism while simultaneously exploiting African resources. He called out America for its loans, military programs, and intelligence operations, accusing Washington of prioritizing profit and influence over the well-being of African citizens. These were not the words of a typical politician. They were bold, confrontational, and deeply symbolic. For a continent long accustomed to foreign influence, this was unprecedented. In Washington, analysts began drawing uncomfortable comparisons. Traoré's defiance was reminiscent of Fidel Castro during the Cold War. Just as Castro had resisted American pressure and formed strategic alliances with the Soviet Union, Traoré was exploring partnerships with Russia and China, challenging the old Western monopoly on influence. The implications were enormous. If Burkina Faso, a relatively small nation, could defy the United States and its allies, what message would that send to other African countries? Could this spark a wider movement of independence and resistance across the continent? The CIA, of course, was not idle. In the past, the agency had quietly orchestrated coups, spread propaganda, and undermined leaders who resisted American control. From Lumumba to Sankara, the playbook was clear: destabilize, delegitimize, and, if necessary, remove. Traoré's rise triggered discussions at the highest levels in Washington, with officials scrambling to assess the risks. Rumors circulated about possible covert actions, threats of sanctions, and media campaigns designed to portray him as reckless or authoritarian. But for the first time, the United States faced a leader whose popularity at home and abroad made such tactics far less effective. What makes Traoré uniquely threatening to Washington is not only his policies but the symbolism he represents. He is young, uncorrupted, and deeply rooted in the revolutionary traditions of Africa. He speaks the language of Pan-Africanism, calling for unity among nations that were once divided by colonial powers. He inspires Africa's youth, the majority of the continent's population, who are eager to see change, justice, and opportunity. This is not merely politics. It is a movement. Traoré is not a figurehead. He is a catalyst for a continent-wide awakening. For Black America, the story carries a different resonance. Generations have looked to Africa with a mixture of pride and pain, aware of its history but longing for its future. Leaders like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. drew connections between the struggles of African Americans and the fight against colonialism in Africa. Today, Traoré's actions are reviving that connection, showing that the struggle for dignity, self-determination, and justice is not confined to one continent. His defiance of Washington resonates with African Americans who recognize similar patterns of oppression in their own country. It is a reminder that history is not distant. It is alive, and it continues to unfold. Washington's fear goes beyond resources or alliances. It is about narrative control. For decades, the United States has presented itself as a champion of freedom and democracy. Traoré's actions expose a different story, one of manipulation, exploitation, and attempts to maintain power through covert means. When a young African leader publicly challenges these narratives, the facade begins to crack. The world starts to see not just a government, but an empire struggling to maintain its grip in a changing world. The challenges facing Traoré are immense. Sanctions, propaganda, and pressure from powerful nations are constant threats. Yet, he navigates these obstacles with remarkable acumen. He leverages social media to communicate directly with his people, bypassing traditional channels that could distort his message. He builds alliances with other African leaders who share his vision of independence, and he remains steadfast in his rejection of Western domination, demonstrating that real power does not always come from wealth or military might, but from conviction and the support of the people. Historically, Washington has relied on fear and division to maintain control. It has used economic dependence, military influence, and covert intelligence operations to shape outcomes in Africa. These strategies worked for decades because the global environment was unipolar. The United States could dictate terms, and most leaders complied, either out of fear or necessity. Traoré's rise represents a break from this pattern. In a multipolar world where China and Russia offer alternatives, the old methods no longer guarantee compliance. Leaders can assert independence without being completely isolated, and when they do, the ripple effects are enormous. Social media has amplified these effects. Speeches, interviews, and public statements spread across continents in hours, reaching millions who are hungry for an alternative narrative. Traoré's defiance inspires discussions in African capitals, university campuses, and diaspora communities in the United States. It sparks debates about sovereignty, justice, and the role of foreign powers in shaping national destinies. For Washington, this visibility is dangerous. Once influence becomes a public conversation, covert strategies lose their effectiveness. Traoré's policies are also strategically calculated. He invests in regional unity, encouraging collaboration among Sahel nations and the economic community of West African states. By promoting trade, infrastructure, and military cooperation, he reduces dependency on Western powers and creates a self-sufficient bloc. These moves are subtle but profound. They do not merely resist foreign influence. They offer an alternative model of governance and cooperation that challenges decades of Western dominance. The generational impact cannot be overstated. Africa's youth are watching, learning, and participating. They see that defiance is possible, that leadership can be honest and visionary, and that the global balance of power can be questioned. This inspiration extends to Black America, where historical ties to Africa amplify the resonance of Traoré's actions. For millions, he is more than a president. He is a symbol of hope and courage. Washington faces a dilemma. Traoré cannot be easily undermined through traditional methods. He cannot be bought or intimidated, and any overt attempt to destabilize him could backfire spectacularly in the public eye. The United States can attempt sanctions, diplomatic pressure, or media narratives. But in a world connected by instant communication and global awareness, these tactics are limited. Traoré's popularity and strategic alliances make him resilient in ways that previous leaders never were. The lessons of history are clear. The same forces that eliminated Lumumba and Sankara are now confronted with a leader who understands their methods and anticipates their moves. Traoré's knowledge of history informs his strategy, allowing him to navigate threats while inspiring loyalty and trust. His ability to merge revolutionary ideals with modern diplomacy creates a formidable combination. He is not merely reacting. He is shaping the future of his country and, potentially, the continent. Looking forward, the stakes are high. Africa's independence movements, the rise of multipolar global power, and the awakening of youth and diaspora communities suggest a shift that cannot be ignored. Traoré's actions are emblematic of a broader transformation, one where the old rules no longer apply. Washington's old playbook of coups, propaganda, and economic coercion is losing its effectiveness. The new world demands negotiation, respect, and recognition of sovereign ambitions. For the United States, this is the battle it cannot win, not because of military inferiority, but because influence is no longer unidirectional. Information flows freely, alliances are multipolar, and populations are aware. Traoré may be one man, but he embodies the shift in consciousness that challenges centuries of control. For Black America and Africa alike, his story is a beacon, a reminder that leadership, courage, and vision can redefine history. If Washington could not control Traoré, what hope is there for maintaining the old order in Africa? What happens when other nations follow his lead? How will a continent rich in resources, intelligence, and potential navigate a world where power is contested, not dictated? These are questions that Washington, and indeed the world, must grapple with. Ibrahim Traoré is more than a president. He is a symbol, a challenge, and a force that no empire can easily ignore. His rise is not just political, it is historic. And for those paying attention, it is only the beginning.